Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to discuss with you a little bit of a follow-up on a video I did a few days ago. I did a video on reducing risk in crypto investing through DeFi, and I talked about lending, staking, and yield farming, and kind of some of the opportunities that a lot of people don't realize are out there right now. And I had some questions regarding that video around where do the returns come from, right? If you're getting these above average returns, then you would say, okay, well, why is that? There must be something that's going on here. And so today I'm going to explain specifically to you around the lending side. I'm going to do a future video on staking, and I'll do a future video on yield farming. I'm going to explain to you, where do the returns come from? If you're getting like super high numbers, you know, is that a Ponzi scheme? Is it real? Where is it real? Where is it not real? Where do those returns come from? Why does it make sense? Where doesn't it make sense? And as a result, what are the opportunities that you can take advantage of right now? Just being aware that a lot of them won't last because kind of the nature of the market is it will correct. Basically, market inefficiencies will go away. And I'll explain a little bit about how that's going to work as well. So we're going to dive into that. Before we do, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell. Really appreciate your support joining this channel. If you would like this content and other content like it, please let me know what you'd like. And please check out our previous videos. You can find, I try to produce great content for you every single day. And if you're interested at all in help with international structuring, you know, what to do with your life or your business in terms of the strategy or in terms of the implementation, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, or check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com, and send us a message through there. Okay, so lending. All right, so one of the main things that kind of evolved, I would say primarily in 2020, was the introduction or the mainstreaming of lending within crypto. Okay, they had it before that, but that was like, it's really started to explode. You had protocols like Aave that went crazy. You had a lot of this, BlockFi, Celsius, these different guys. And this is certainly one way that you can get some more stable returns on your money and thereby reduce your risk if you're playing the crypto game, okay? And so there's two ways that you would lend. You would lend either a stable coin or you would lend some sort of crypto, right? So for example, you might lend Bitcoin or you might lend USDC. So we're going to use these as examples in this particular case. And then I'm going to do a farther out one to kind of show you where some of the market inefficiencies are, where you could expect better returns, okay? So the first question is basically, all right, well, if somebody is going to be lending out, let's say USDC, what are the risks associated with that, okay? Somebody asked, hey, you know, can they exit scam? I've talked in previous videos. I'm a really, really big fan of non-custodial solutions where you only have the smart contract exposure. You don't actually have an underlying organization. So historically, we had different exchanges that were centralized, that they basically were holding somebody's money. They could take it and they could run. If you have a non-custodial solution, they can't do that. The risk is, you know, of course, there's always hacking and some things like this that could potentially happen. But that being said, much more safe, especially if the smart contracts are properly audited and things like this, okay? So that's useful. So let's say that somebody is gonna go and they're gonna lend USDC, and let's just say they can get 18% return on it, right? How is that? How is it that somebody is lending or willing to pay 18%, because they need to actually be willing to pay more on the other side in order to make this work, right? There's a couple different ways in which places that these returns make sense. Let's say that, for example, I have Bitcoin and I want to borrow fiat against it. Now there's usually two different reasons that somebody might do this. One is, you know, let's for instance say Bitcoin is around 60,000 right now and you believe that it's going to 180,000 over the next year, right? Well, if you're in that position, you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, right? So if you have some expenses to pay, you're willing to borrow money against that Bitcoin, get something else, and even if you're paying, you know, 18% or 12% or whatever the number is in there, it's nothing compared to what you're going to make. So therefore, you're willing to do that borrowing. And over the long term, I mean, we've already seen this to some extent that the borrowing costs have dropped quite a bit, and they'll probably continue to reach fairly close to bank rates. Just because of the fact that, number one, I mean, you're borrowing, like, if there's an opportunity that somebody could basically borrow real fiat, turn around, buy, say, USDC, which is basically fiat, and then they can turn around and lend it and they can make a spread, you know, they're going to do that. And so the market is going to compress that spread over time, right? And at the same time, the risk is actually extremely low. of default in these cases because these are massively over-collateralized loans. So for example, maybe you take Bitcoin and maybe you have 60,000, maybe you have one Bitcoin that you decide to borrow against and it's worth 60,000. And so let's say that we allow you to borrow 30,000 based on that. So first of all, of course, 50% is a big buffer, right? But on top of that, what ends up happening is you have a liquidation engine associated with that, and you have in the smart contract control that in the event that the collateral is insufficient, it can liquidate that Bitcoin. So if you think about this, let's compare it to borrowing against a house, right? What's the process if you lend money against somebody's house, right? You get a mortgage. All right, you have the security that you could take that property, but what's the hassle of doing that? What's the real-time information about the value of that property? It's not very good, right? So in other words, if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, all right, well, you know, the price of the property could have dropped below the value of the mortgage, but how do I know that in real time? Not really easy to know, and it's hard to tell how much my excess equity is in that property at any given time. In addition to that, I'm in a position where if I say, okay, I want to foreclose on that property, it's a whole legal process. This is going to cost me, you know, depending on where you are in the world, it could take months, it could cost thousands of dollars, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in these cases where you have this non-custodial smart contracts that facilitate this lending, it's just connected to some sort of a pricing oracle. And you can say, okay, if the price drops such that we only have a 30% margin of safety on here, then it's just going to liquidate a sufficient amount to be able to keep paying you off to maintain that ratio. And it can do this essentially infinitely and essentially in real time. So very, very safe from a security standpoint, okay? So that's the first thing to understand. Now, the second reason why somebody would be quite happily wanting to borrow, say, USDC, and why they might do that as opposed to, say, borrowing pure fiat, is because they think, again, that Bitcoin is going to go up, say, 3x, right? If you think that, then what should you in theory do? You should probably take as much Bitcoin as you can. You should go borrow against it and buy more Bitcoin, right? Which is what a lot of people are doing today, right? They say, okay, great, I have $300,000 in Bitcoin. I'm going to deposit it into one of these platforms. I'm going to borrow USDC against it. Now maybe I can do that to the tune of, let's just say 150,000 in USDC. Now I'm going to go buy more Bitcoin. Now I can go back, I can deposit that. I'm going to do 75,000 this time, and so on and so forth. So it allows them to leverage up. And this is very rational. If you think the prices are going up much faster than the rate of interest, like you would do that all day long. Okay? So that's where some of this comes from. The second place where some of it comes from, and why you'll get excessive returns, is what are the tokens, okay? So if you're doing the major tokens, what you're going to find is that the ability to get return on something like, lending, say with Bitcoin or something, is pretty low because there's a lot of places that you can lend out your collateralize your Bitcoin and get returns. But what if you're talking about, a lesser used token? So we're going to use, as an example, Venus. Okay, the token ticker symbol is XVS. If you want to look it up, they're a lending platform on Binance Smart Chain. Okay, so it's like a top 200 token. It's in the hundreds of millions, but it's not massive. Certainly, it would be likely to experience more price volatility than something like Bitcoin would. And so the question is, if you have XVS and you want to borrow against it, how many people are lending against it? Not many. It's new, And so as long as you have an environment where people are not sitting there willing to lend against it, you're going to have an environment where you can turn around and you can charge more for being that lender, right? So if you say, okay, I have USDC and I'm willing to lend it out on a platform that will accept this lesser known token, then, and the person thinks, like, look, I talked to somebody, was it today or yesterday, who they had purchased Flow, and it was up 360x in like a year from the ICO, okay? So just think about this. If you're like, okay, great, I have this token, I want to buy more of this token, I think it's going to go up a lot, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? So same principle is true here. So lending is, I mean, it's a pretty well-established business. Lending is not like some sort of a pyramid scheme or Ponzi scheme or something like that. There certainly is, if you're in a custodial solution, then you have certain organizational risk, which is true, by the way, in any case. Like if you turn around and you put your money into a mortgage investment corporation, you have organizational risk the same way as you do if you put your money into BlockFi or Celsius, right? On the same token, if you go into non-custodial, you don't have that risk. You still do have smart contract risk, right? It's possible that there's some sort of a hack or something like that. Usually, that risk gets figured out earlier on. There's companies that do audits, and so I would say that a lot of them, you can kind of work out that, okay, these are established long-term players, and their contracts have been audited, and it's, you know, they've withstood the test of time. And so it's unlikely that they're going to be breached, but it doesn't mean that they won't be. So anyway, something to keep in mind. But yeah, that explains where the returns are coming from in lending and why, you know, you could go to Filda and maybe get, you know, 60% returns on USDC right now, just because of the fact that maybe what people are borrowing against are less common tokens that other people aren't lending against. And there's a fairly small pool of money there that's willing to lend against it, and so that's how it balances out. So hope that helps, hope that gives a general understanding. I'm gonna do other videos explaining yield farming and staking, how those work, and you can check those out and understand, again, like where's something real, where's something not, how does that work, and yeah, we're gonna see from there. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you have questions, put them in the comments below, and I'm gonna look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.